someone who is involved in the Scottish Parliament's Tenement Maintenance Working Group, do you have insights you can share about how that is moving forward?
Oh yes, lots of them, Brian. Lots of them, Brian.
You've been waiting for that question, obviously.
No, I've been hoping and waiting for this moment in time that is happening at the moment with forthcoming legislation for a long, long time. I was privileged to be invited onto something called the Housing Improvement Task Force. It goes back to 2000, which was a review of housing stock. Scottish Government review of housing stock. And one of the things that we mentioned earlier that came out of that piece of work was the Tenement Scotland Act. Also the Title Conditions Act 2003 came out of that. And there were some fairly strong and robust recommendations made by the factoring industry at that point. It included compulsory common insurance, which still hasn't received the necessary confidence of those making decisions to go through, but hopefully one day that will come to pass. But that piece of work made strong recommendations for owners' associations as formal bodies. Sadly, that didn't go through. However, where we are now, 25 years on, is that the Scottish Government have instructed or had instructed the Scottish Law Commission to embark on a piece of work which ultimately will transform into a report and a bill and hopefully become an act in the fullness of time, which will be to the benefit of the country's housing stock immeasurably. And it's something that, in my opinion, was a missed opportunity all these years ago. It's a housing issue, although we're here today talking about factoring. The factoring side of it is a byproduct of this legislation, which hopefully is going to get through. The Tenement Maintenance Working Group, which you alluded to, again, I was privileged to be invited to be part of that. That has been a frustratingly slow process, but a pleasing process as to where it's got to at the moment, which is, as I mentioned, the Scottish Law Commission has been invited by the Scottish Government to consider the proposals put forward by the Maintenance Working Group, which is 3 strands. Rather disappointingly, they've picked up only in the first one, but their argument for that is if we can get the first one right, the other 2 will flow. So they've concentrated on compulsory owners' associations. Okay. The 2 that flow beyond that will be building condition inspections, 5-year inspections, and building reserve funds. I had hoped that it will come together collectively, but that's the way that it is going at the moment. So where we are at the moment is that the Scottish Law Commission spent 2 years researching it, came up with a discussion paper, which went out for public consultation the early part of the year, with an enormous amount of very relevant questions. The result of that will be a final report by them and a draft bill, which they're suggesting will come out in 2026. And the principal purpose behind that bill will be to create an owners' association for every tenement property, whether it's a tenement of 2 or 3 units or whether it's a tenement of 500 units, that there will be a legal obligation to have an owners' association. We have owners' associations, some of them formal, some informal, but this will be a requirement, a legislative requirement for every owner to form an association, and they'll have a period of time in which to do so. So we're interested to sit by and see what the Scottish Law Commission come up with. I'm very pleased that they seem to understand it. They seem to grasp what it's about. And as I mentioned earlier, the factoring side is a byproduct of this. This is not about factoring, although it's helpful that they're interested in having people from our industry that can relate the real life stories. It's all very well looking at the technicalities of it and the legalities of it, but the true life stories of how this could impact on people is important, and they've taken that on. So that is an exciting time, I think, in the factoring industry.
Okay. Actually, it reminded me of my niece is about to buy her first flat. And of course, every single time she finds one, my brother who messaged me and goes, how do I search the factors register again to find out who manages this? And she's seen a few, and she came up with one the other day, and it's cheap, of course. It's up in Dundee. It's cheap. The home report is not great, and it's self-factored. Okay, so I said to my brother, I said she needs to ask, what does that mean and what is in there, and I think she's decided not to go for it because of the amount of problems or the amount of kind of things on the home report that aren't great, and the fact that it's self-factor. Because whilst to a 23-year-old, not having a factors bill would be a great thing. She does understand that she needs to maintain it. Yeah, and it's obviously not been maintained overly well. It's and I think that's the problem, because you've got, and we've spoken about this many, many, many times on this podcast, and it's the education piece about people actually understanding that they need to look after the property and stuff, and it tends to be downsizers and new people.
Yeah, I've got a view on that, Brian, because I've heard throughout my entire career that there's a lack of education, there's a lack of training of owners, and we need to grasp this. And I disagree with that, because I think, short of a Scottish Government long-standing publicity campaign on TV and billboards, which is not going to happen, that I think there's been an enormous amount of education and public information out there. You just need to tap into Scottish Government website. Every local authority will have the information. Every factoring organisation will have the information. The charity Under One Roof, who I'm not sure if they've been in your podcast or not, have got a fabulous website with a host of information about what it means to be an owner. So I keep hearing this, that there's an education needs to be put forward to the homeowning public. I think the question, does that homeowning public, you're referencing your daughter, are they really actually interested? Do they really want to?
It's apathy then, that they don't. It's not something they're interested in or have to worry about. So therefore, they don't.
Yeah, and it's surprising, isn't it? Why, when you're probably your biggest single purchase, your biggest single asset, why would you be apathetic about the potential for it? Yeah. I mean, one thing that would discount probably about 60% of tenement flats that would be available if I was looking to purchase one like your daughter. I would never buy a property that was unfactored or self-factored. Not a criticism of self-factoring, because that can absolutely work, but I wouldn't want to run the risk. And I would never buy a top floor flat. Yeah. So that in itself discounts you. Now, there's something wrong with the system if somebody like me with the experience I have in the industry saying I wouldn't buy a top floor flat and I wouldn't buy one without a factor. I mean, that could change, obviously. You could have one with a factor, whether it's local authority or not. That could change overnight.